Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Kuwait and Bahrain face renewed aerial attacks from Iran as Tehran and Washington exchange strikes in a battle for control of the vital Strait of Hormuz. Ukraine awards Britain's Keir Starmer its Order of Freedom honour as the outgoing British Prime Minister makes his final visit to the capital Kiev. Starmer is set to be replaced by the former Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, who only became an MP again last month. French President Emmanuel Macron says there will be zero tolerance for arson after France was hit by wildfires that have scorched thousands of hectares. A fire at an orphanage in Algeria's capital kills at least 11 people, including children, amid a heat wave that has sparked hundreds of blazes in the country's north. Authorities say the toll is provisional, adding that another 19 people were injured in the fire. And Google accuses the EU of putting Europeans' privacy at risk after Brussels tells the US giant to share search data and open up its Android operating system to AI rivals. Hello and thank you for being with us. Let's begin with our top story. The United States has officially retained its highest possible warning for citizens traveling to East Africa. Washington is keeping Uganda firmly on its level 4 do not travel list. This comes from a fresh alert by the US Department of State Consular Affairs. It posted a direct reminder on X through their official account, TravelGov. The message was blunt.
We issue travel advisories with levels 1 to 4. Level 4 means do not travel. We assign Level 4 based on local conditions and our limited ability to help Americans there. These places are dangerous. Do not go for any reason.
So why is Uganda under such a strict ban? The US State Department highlights several ongoing threats to safety: violent crime, terrorism and attacks on tourists, protests breaking out with little to no warning, laws targeting homosexuality, and health risk due to the latest Ebola outbreak. Uganda shares a border with the epicenter of the outbreak, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC. Now, despite a porous border, Uganda recorded a total of 20 cases and 2 deaths, and most of them were Congolese citizens who had crossed the border. The rest have recovered. Uganda has discharged its last Ebola patient today, and now it must pass the 42-day mark without a new case to be declared officially Ebola-free under the WHO guidelines. Along with retaining the Uganda travel ban, Washington has further restricted travel from its neighbor, the DRC. According to the latest advisory, US citizens and nationals who have traveled to the DR Congo will not be allowed to board return flights to contain the spread of Ebola. Now, those individuals will have to remain outside of the DRC for 21 days before entering the United States. Critics warn that these measures could reduce the number of American health workers available for Ebola response operations in the DRC. With these latest updates on US travel restrictions, Africa now has the largest regional concentration of level 4 warnings in the world. There are now 11 African nations placed under the do not travel category. Let's take a look at the other African nations on this travel ban list. Along with Uganda and the DRC, it includes Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, Central African Republic, Mali, Libya, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad. Most of these nations have stayed on the list for years. The reasons are consistent: ongoing civil wars, weak government control, cross-border insurgencies, and frequent kidnappings targeting Westerners. Now, why do these advisories matter so much? Now, even though they are meant for American citizens, the rest of the world watches them very closely. International travel agencies, global insurance companies, and foreign investors use these US lists as a benchmark. When a country hits level 4, insurance policies often become void, and global companies pull their staff out. It hits local economies hard, especially in sectors like tourism and foreign investment. This is what the case has been with Uganda. Tourism remains a key driver of investment, employment, and foreign exchange earnings. Its contribution to the GDP stands at 5.9%, bringing in nearly $1.6 billion in earnings and supporting nearly 880,000 jobs. Last year, more than 1.6 million international visitors arrived in Uganda, and American tourists make up around 20% of all non-African visitors. So clearly, tourism is the backbone of Uganda's economy, and the country cannot afford to let the sector slip into losses. The country's army chief and President Museveni's son, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, has raised alarm over the US travel warnings. He urged Washington to reconsider and review the travel advisory, arguing that the warning is unfairly hurting the tourism sector. While Ugandan leaders insist that the country is secure, the US State Department's warning remains active. For Uganda, the stakes are incredibly high. Tourism brings in billions of dollars every year and supports millions of local livelihoods. But with the level 4 US travel warning in place, Uganda's tourism sector is bracing for troublesome times ahead. Now, for more on this, we have with us Edgar Mutangisa, who's a former EAC Youth Ambassador to Uganda, joining us live from Mbarara, Uganda. Thank you for being with us, Edgar.
Yes, thank you so much, host TV. It's been a long time since we were last here.
Now, Uganda has... Right. Let's jump straight into the questions. Uganda has just discharged its last Ebola patient, and its leadership says that the country is now secure. In your view, is Washington's level 4 warning a fair reflection of the actual safety risks on the ground in Uganda, or is this an overreaction?
Yes, thank you so much. Definitely. Thanks so much, Alison. I think this is an overreaction for very obvious reasons. We have heard from the experts, our own health officials, and the data, as you mentioned rightly, right now we do not have any. The last case has been discharged, but also there has been a lot of exaggeration, and we have seen this typical of Washington from the past, even including other cases where we had Marburg and all those outbreaks. So I think this is really an overreaction, and especially also if you consider not just what Ugandan officials tell you, but also if you consider the French embassy's regional office did actually also mention and was able to eulogize the capabilities of Uganda in handling so far this Ebola outbreak. But in Washington, I think it has been really a very exaggerated sort of stance and overview of how the Ebola situation is in Uganda. As you stated clearly, just 20 cases, only 2 deaths, most of which were just Congolese citizens, but who had just come to Uganda, and all those have been managed so well. I think what Washington should be doing right now is not to issue these alerts or these threats, but rather actually probably learn from the model of Uganda of managing epidemics.
Right. Now, the State Department's advisory explicitly highlights Uganda's laws targeting homosexuality alongside threats like terrorism. To what extent is this do not travel designation being used as diplomatic leverage by the US rather than a pure security assessment?
Yeah, that's a very interesting idea, because I think it's actually obviously to a great extent that the US is really doing this, I think, for political reason, but also for just leverage that is really very dishonest. Because if you look at Uganda, there's no any terrorism cases, especially in the recent history. If such threats were to be combined and you bring in security concerns, maybe that would have been during the election period. But the election period has settled. The political environment in Uganda is very calm. So it really fits any sort of data or at least reality on the ground. So it's very, very, we don't know exactly where that, I think, idea comes from. We think it's very far-fetched to bring in these world security concerns together with these. But we also think there's an underlying factor here where the US just wants to leverage and maybe force Uganda's hand against the Anti-Homosexuality Act, which was passed in 2023. So, because you see, they're also put in the same category, and we understand how the US views that. But again, that will be a debate for another day. But that's concerning how the broad situation is, and in that list and the kind of offenses that have been put in that same category and bracket, there is no correlation whatsoever. And in fact, many people have, if you talk to people on the ground, they're just wondering on what the intention really is, or maybe it's just a political intention or to help the Washington maneuver and force Uganda's hand in some way. But there is no any really legitimate and actual concerns that comes from that listing and grouping that they have made so far. Yes.
And Edgar, with American tourists making up 20% of Uganda's non-African visitors, and global insurance policies often voided by this kind of level of warning, this level 4 warning, how devastating is this in the long term for the country's tourism sector and then, by extension, its economy?
Yes, I think that might be very devastating in the future. But if you compare now, from the time when that travel issuance was made, the insurance operators here on the ground have reported no major declines in terms of the tourists who have cancelled their trips or who have registered. And so as much as we might have long-term impacts, of course, later, due to obvious reasons of the US's position and other countries, also other tourists from other countries getting to fear, but also, as you mentioned, the insurance companies pulling out on those policies for the travelers, as much as that might come in the near future, but currently it hasn't had any significant impact on our tourism sector. But also, we think this strategy is very misguided if that was the intention of the US. And it makes us wonder whether the US is still applying the same economics that they were applying when they were putting tariffs on goods from China, not understanding that those tariffs would end up being paid by American citizens themselves. The same situation here happens, that if the American tourists who have interest in Uganda make these tourism bookings sometimes a year in advance, so they've already paid all these premiums, they've already paid all these policies of insurance, they've already paid the hotels in Uganda. So if you just cancel and put that alert, which is unnecessary, the net loss goes so much to your own citizens from Washington, and not necessarily also, of course, the economy of Uganda. Though, of course, the economy of Uganda might suffer long term, but we think it's a very misguided policy, especially when it comes from this unrealistic presentation of facts on the ground.
Right. Edgar, thank you for being with us on the show.
Yeah, thank you. That was a pleasure.
The Democratic Republic of Congo is fighting two crises at the same time. One is Ebola, the other is a healthcare system that is beginning to break. The health workers battling the virus have now gone on strike, not because they are afraid of Ebola, but because they say that they have not been paid. Now, healthcare workers have walked off the job at Bunia General Hospital in Ituri province, one of the facilities at the heart of Congo's Ebola response. Staff barricaded the hospital entrance, demanding months of unpaid salaries.
Since we started the job 2.5 months ago, we haven't received anything. We are suffering the consequences because of the community's situation. We save lives in the community, and to this day, it's like they are biased in who they pay. They aren't paying us.
The protests follow earlier walkouts at the Rampara General Hospital, one of the hardest hit Ebola treatment centres. Doctors, epidemiologists, hygiene staff, and even grave diggers say they have been working since the outbreak began without receiving their pay.
Beyond money, there's also professional conscience. Of course, we're making demands because we're people with responsibilities. We're breadwinners in the family. Because at the beginning, it wasn't easy. Even our families put pressure on us, supposedly saying, "No, you're making us vulnerable," all that. But since we've taken an oath, we've given over our bodies and souls. But now, in return, the Congolese government, our state, must also think of us.
The Congolese government has reportedly acknowledged delays in payments. The health minister stated that authorities are audit-checking payrolls to ensure salaries go to actual frontline workers rather than fraudulent names. But for the workers, that explanation has done little to ease their frustration. They are caring for some of the world's most infectious patients, handling contaminated fluids, and even burying Ebola victims. At least 112 healthcare workers have reportedly been infected, and 35 have died. Despite the strike, patients say that many doctors return to their duties, putting their professional oath ahead of their own hardship.
We were really afraid because our health was already at risk. Our whole lives were at risk. The doctors' strike at the treatment center was a very worrying situation. Now that they have resumed service, it is a great joy for us.
While the pay dispute continues, the virus is spreading even faster. The current outbreak is caused by the rare Bundibuyo strain of Ebola, which has no approved vaccine yet and no specific treatment. Now, more than 2,000 cases have been officially recorded, with over 700 deaths. But the World Health Organization says the true scale of the outbreak could be far greater.
So we think with some of our support in modeling that the scale of the outbreak is at least 2 to 4 times the number of cases that we have found. Every day, our capacity to find cases are increasing and improving. So the confidence in the numbers keeps improving day to day.
The WHO also says the response team is running out of money. Although international donors have pledged billions of dollars to support Congo, the UN Health Agency says it has received only 40% of the funding it requested for this outbreak.
To date, we've received 40% of the funding that we asked for. In the face of such an urgent and glaring threat, that leaves a gap of approximately 70 million at a critical time in the response.
But for the health workers in the DR Congo, the funding debate is no longer about international pledges. They say it is about whether the money ever reaches the people risking their lives to contain the outbreak. As the response stalls, the impact is already being felt inside treatment centres. Families have reportedly climbed over fences, desperate to check whether their loved ones are still alive, after strikes temporarily disrupted operations.
I came here to see my daughter and her daughter, who are sick with Ebola, but they told me not to enter because there is a strike. I simply wanted to know how they are doing.
The fight against Ebola is being tested far beyond the hospital wards. When the people saving lives can no longer afford to do their jobs, the country risks losing its first line of defense as the virus continues to outpace the response. $17 billion, 700,000 barrels of oil a day, and a battle that has already begun. Aliko Dangote's next mega refinery is headed to Kenya. But before a single barrel of oil is refined, the project is facing growing resistance from environmental campaigners. Greenpeace Africa is calling for the project to be suspended. The group says no approval should move forward until an independent environmental and social impact assessment is completed. Greenpeace warns the refinery could threaten Lamu's fragile coastal ecosystem, including mangrove forests, coral reefs, and seagrass beds. The group also cites the risk of oil spills, air pollution, and higher carbon emissions.
This project threatens to damage one of East Africa's most fragile coastal ecosystems while locking Kenya into a risky fossil fuel future. This refinery also risks becoming a stranded asset as the world moves toward cleaner energy. It would also lock Kenya into decades of carbon-intensive development, worsening climate change and its impacts.
The opposition comes just days after Dangote Industries confirmed that the refinery will be built at Lamu Port, ending months of speculation over whether the project would go to Kenya or Tanzania. The decision hands Kenya one of the largest private industrial investments in its history. The $17 billion plant is expected to process 700,000 barrels of crude oil a day, making it the largest refinery in East Africa. Reports say construction could take around 30 months. So why Kenya? Not because of its oil, but because of its location. Lamu sits along one of the world's busiest shipping routes with direct access to the Indian Ocean. From here, refined fuel can reach Uganda, South Sudan, Rwanda, Burundi, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. For Dangote, the project creates a strategic East African hub to complement his refinery in Lagos on Africa's Atlantic coast. For Kenya's President William Ruto, the project fits a broader economic strategy. The government says it could create jobs, boost energy security, and attract new investment. Around 800,000 Kenyans enter the job market every year, and Nairobi sees large industrial projects as a way to support that growing workforce. But that is exactly where the argument begins. Now, Greenpeace says the promised economic benefits could come at the expense of existing livelihoods. The group argues that many of the jobs would be temporary, while fishing, tourism, and local coastal economies could suffer long-term damage. It also warns the refinery could become what it calls a stranded asset as more countries shift toward cleaner sources of energy. The debate now stretches far beyond Kenya. It has become a test of Africa's development model. Environmental groups say the continent should avoid new fossil fuel dependence and invest directly in clean energy. Supporters of the project argue Africa cannot build industry, create jobs, or strengthen energy security without large-scale oil infrastructure. So this is more than a fight over one refinery. It is a battle over how Africa chooses to develop. And what happens in Lamu could help shape Africa's industrial development strategy for decades to come. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Forget the multi-million-dollar contracts and the stadium drama. The most inspiring football stars this World Cup season might not be in the finals. They're in rural Kenya. Meet the Mayani soccer grannies. They're ditching the rocking chairs, beating high blood pressure, and proving that age is just a number, one kickoff at a time. You think the FIFA World Cup final has high stakes? Wait until you see these grandmothers play. Our next report brings you the details.
Spain and Argentina have moved to the FIFA World Cup final. The whole world will be watching the big showdown on Sunday with bated breath. But World Cup fever goes far beyond the big stadium pitch. Meet the Mayani soccer grannies. They live in rural Kenya. and they are gripped by football fever. But they do not just watch the game, they play it. Dressed in full uniform, these athletes are ready for action. But they defy the conventional image of a footballer. Meet Penina Wembua, a 56-year-old grandmother of 3. For her, joining this squad has been a life-altering experience.
I started playing football in 2026, this year. Before I started playing, I had pains all over my body. I was not feeling well because I had high blood pressure. But since I started playing soccer, I am doing well. I don't have any health problems. I can walk far, and I hope I will live longer.
Wembua's journey reflects a larger trend in Makueni County. More senior citizens are embracing the sport to boost their physical fitness. What began as a simple exercise routine has blossomed into a supportive community.
This group was formed as a necessity for those of us who have retired and they are leading fairly idle lives and having a lot of challenges with our bodies. So we came together to kick for health, looking for good health for ourselves so that we keep healthy, we reduce the drugs we take for our bodies, and socialize. We come together, we pray together, we play together, we sing, we laugh together.
The club now boasts a growing roster. Meeting twice a week to practice, they even travel to compete against rival grandmother squads. On this pitch, age truly becomes irrelevant.
At the moment, we are 53, average age is 60, and the advantages of being together and playing football, we have seen it in our health. People are now living more healthy lives, and they are eager to come every time we are meeting because they have seen the benefits to their bodies, to their health. The oldest, it could be around 80, I'm not sure, but the youngest is 50. I myself am 76 years old.
These players draw their motivation directly from the global tournament. They closely follow the star athletes and root for their top picks. Many of these grandmothers come from rural homes lacking electricity. To adapt, they gather at one of the houses with electricity to catch the match highlights together. With the current time zone differences, this daytime viewing suits them perfectly.
We've been watching World Cup, and it is so good to see them playing. We love our young men who are in the field, and we admire them. I personally have been supporting DR Congo. Though they have gone out, I know they played a very good game.
This sports movement is spreading across Kenya and the wider continent. These women are redefining what it means to grow old. Medical professionals agree that their active lifestyle yields massive rewards.
So also, other than physical benefits, remaining active and being consistent in exercise, it also improves one's mental health because of the production of the endorphin hormone that we call it a happy hormone. And that's with aging, one is able to manage any form of stress because they are active. And this hormone is persistently being produced. So they are happy, they remain happy with good mood, high self-esteem.
But this journey is not without obstacles. Resources are tight, and finding proper fields or uniforms is a constant struggle. But these grandmothers are unstoppable. They rely on community support and personal contributions to fund their passion. For the Mayeni soccer grannies, it is not about winning trophies. It is about staying healthy, fighting stress, and building friendships. They are proving that you are never too old to chase a football or a dream. Who knows, maybe one day we will see a football World Cup for grandmothers.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and good night.